Welcome to True Unseen Crime, where the shadows hold secrets and the truth is never what it seems. If you love gripping mysteries and real crime suspense, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Now, let's dive into today's chilling case. The case of Jacob Fincher, the man who laughed at death. Jacob Fincher wasn't a man easily shaken. A seasoned trucker, he'd clocked thousands of miles on America's loneliest highways. He'd seen cars vanish into the night, eerie roadside figures, and headlights that never quite belonged to any vehicle. But his biggest fear? Dying alone. That's what led him to a secretive online group called the Restless Ones. A chat room filled with people who claimed to have cheated death. And Jacob?
He wanted in.
At first, it was just a bunch of weirdos swapping stories about how fear wasn't real. Then came the photo. A blurry image of Jacob, taken from outside his truck. The caption read, "He sees us now." Jacob was alone on the highway. So, who took the picture? At exactly 1:13 a.m., Jacob's CB radio crackled to life. A voice low, rasping, choked with static. "Laugh, Jacob." His blood ran cold. Laugh, or it gets worse. The hair on his arms stood up.
His throat went dry.
He reached for the dial, but the radio shut off by itself. Then he saw it. A figure standing in the road ahead. Face obscured, body unnaturally still. Jacob slammed the brakes. And then, the figure grinned, mouth stretching too wide. The headlights flickered, just for a second, and the road was empty. Jacob barely made it to a truck stop. His heart hammered in his chest. He needed coffee, air, anything to clear his head. Inside the diner, he found a payphone and dialed his friend Jason Riker, another trucker in the Restless Ones. Jason picked up on the first ring. Jacob's voice shook. "Man, I think something's messing with me." Jason was silent. Too silent. Then he chuckled. "Told you, man. Death is only real if you believe in it." Jacob hung up. That's when his phone buzzed. A new message. "Check the mirror." He looked up, and his reflection in the diner window was still grinning. Even though he wasn't. Jacob drove all night. Every mile marker, every overhead sign passed in a blur. But he wasn't alone anymore. Something was wrong with the mirrors. Every time he checked his rear view, his reflection was a split second too slow. A second later, it was smiling. And then came the laughter. Not from the radio.
From inside the cab.
Jacob slammed the brakes. And a figure slid from the shadows of the passenger seat.
Grinning.
The truck stop coffee cup fell from Jacob's hand. The figure leaned in. Its voice was his. "You finally see me." Jacob woke up in a motel. His truck was parked outside. Had he checked in? Had he even stopped? The bathroom mirror was shattered. His phone had one new message. "Welcome home, Jacob." That morning, he logged onto the Restless Ones chat. Every profile picture had changed.
To him.
But with a wider grin. Jacob's stomach twisted. He went to delete the chat. But his fingers wouldn't move. Instead, they typed. "I finally get it." Days passed. Jacob avoided mirrors. Avoided his own reflection. But it didn't avoid him. Because now it wasn't just in mirrors. It was in windows. In puddles. In the eyes of strangers. It was everywhere. And it was laughing. Jason Riker got a call that night. Jacob's number. Jason answered, but all he heard was laughter. A low, distorted chuckle. Then, the line went dead. A week later, police searched for Jacob. His truck was still parked outside his house. Inside? Nothing. No sign of struggle. Just his phone. Open to the Restless Ones chat. The last message? "He sees us now." The chat room disappeared. Like it had never existed. Some say if you search the deep web, you might still find it. A group full of grinning profile pictures. And if you join, well, don't laugh. Because death is always listening. To this day, Jacob Fincher's case remains unsolved. But truckers on that same highway? They still hear laughter. And if you ever see a grinning man standing in the road, don't stop. Don't look.
Just keep driving.
Supernatural? A psychotic breakdown? Or something worse? One thing's for sure. When you laugh at death, death laughs back. If you made it this far, you're a true crime fanatic. What do you think happened to Jacob Fincher? Let's discuss in the comments. And remember, a week after Jacob Fincher disappeared, a new profile popped up in the Restless Ones chat room. A username no one had seen before. J.F_laughing. And the profile picture? A grainy black and white image of Jacob's truck with someone standing beside it. No face, just a wide, unnatural grin. Jason Riker, Jacob's closest friend, clicked the profile. A message popped up instantly. "It's funny, isn't it?" Jason's chest tightened. "Who is this?" he typed. "Look outside." Jason's apartment was on the 3rd floor. And yet, something was standing in the parking lot. Looking up, grinning. Jason shut his laptop. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A video attachment. With shaking hands, he pressed play. The screen flickered. A recording from inside a moving truck. The dashboard camera captured a dark, empty road. Jason's stomach twisted. He knew that road. It was the same highway Jacob had disappeared on. Then a low chuckle filled the speakers. The camera feed glitched. And then a face appeared. Too close to the screen. A distorted version of Jacob. Mouth stretched too wide. Laughing. Jason threw his phone across the room. The laughter didn't stop. It was coming from inside his apartment. Jason didn't sleep that night. By morning, he convinced himself it had to be a prank. He grabbed his phone. The video was gone. His call history?
Wiped.
The Restless Ones chat? Deleted. Like it had never existed. But then his phone rang. Unknown number. Jason stared at the screen. He didn't want to answer. But his thumb moved on its own. A low, static-filled voice rasped. "Laugh, Jason." His reflection in the TV screen smiled. But Jason wasn't smiling. The paranoia consumed Jason. Mirrors?
Covered.
TVs? Unplugged. Laptops? Smashed. But it didn't matter. Because his reflection had stopped needing glass. It followed him in shadows. In puddles. In the eyes of strangers. And it always looked the same. Grinning. Like it knew something Jason didn't. Until one night, when Jason stopped seeing it altogether. And that's when he realized. It wasn't in the reflections anymore. It was him. Jason Riker was last seen on a Friday night. Security footage showed him laughing hysterically at a gas station. Then he walked straight into the highway. No hesitation. The truck that hit him never stopped. Police arrived within minutes. No body. Just his phone, screen cracked, still buzzing with notifications. The Restless Ones chat had returned. And every user had the same profile picture. Jason's face.
Smiling.
To this day, the Restless Ones remains an urban legend. Some say if you search the dark web, you might still find it. And if you join, you'll start noticing things. Like a familiar face watching from reflections. A chuckle behind you when no one's there. And a text from an unknown number. Laugh. If you ever get a message telling you to laugh,
Don't.
Because when you laugh at death, death laughs back. A week after Jason Riker disappeared, people started talking. Not in news reports, no one would believe it. But on the dark corners of the Restless Ones. New usernames appeared. New faces. All using Jason's grin. And then a new message surfaced from a deleted account. They're not gone. Just laughing. Detective Hannah Crowley had seen enough insanity in her career. But this case was wrong. Jason Riker's body had never been found. Neither had Jacob Fincher's. But both of their phones had been collected. Same cracked screens. Same final message. Laugh. Crowley stared at the chat logs from the Restless Ones, her gut twisting. She knew she shouldn't do it. But she clicked join. The chatroom opened. But no one was talking. Just hundreds of profiles. Identical grins staring at her. Then a notification. Someone was typing. Crowley's breath hitched. A single message appeared. "Welcome, Detective." And then, every username changed at once. To her name. And every profile picture? Her face. Smiling. Her laptop flickered. The camera light blinked on. She wasn't recording. The screen went black. And in the reflection behind her, someone was standing, grinning. A voice whispered, "You've already joined." Crowley spun around. Nothing. But when she turned back to the laptop, her face was smiling on screen. And she wasn't. She slammed the laptop shut. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She already knew what it would say. Laugh. But she didn't. She wouldn't. Then, a single knock at her front door, followed by another, and another, until it was pounding. She reached for her gun. The pounding stopped. And then, a chuckle. From inside the apartment. Crowley turned. The shadows shifted. Something moved. She fired. 3 shots. Silence. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. A video attachment. Her fingers trembled as she pressed play. The security camera from inside her apartment. It showed her sleeping. A figure standing over her. A hand reaching toward her face. And then, just before the video cut to black, her sleeping self smiled. Detective Hannah Crowley wasn't the type to scare easily. But this wasn't fear. This was something worse. She played the video again. Her own sleeping face. A shadow hovering over her. A hand reaching. And then, before the screen glitched to black, her own lips curling into a smile. That was impossible. She grabbed her gun, checking the apartment again. Locked doors. No sign of forced entry. No cameras that she hadn't installed herself. So how the hell did someone record her? Her phone buzzed. A message from the unknown number. Check under the bed. Crowley wasn't falling for it. Whatever this was, asterisk, hacking, deepfakes, psychological games, asterisk, she wasn't playing along. She took a step back. Then another. But her own reflection in the hallway mirror didn't move. It just stood there,
Grinning.
Her stomach plummeted. And then, the bedroom door slammed shut. From the inside, the pounding returned. Faster. Angrier. Crowley's heart jackhammered against her ribs. The door was locked. She didn't lock it. She grabbed her radio. "This is Detective Crowley, requesting immediate backup at my residence. Possible break-in." Static. Then, a voice. Her own. "You should have laughed." And the radio died. The pounding stopped. The door slowly creaked open. She raised her gun, ready to fire. But there was no one there. Just darkness. And a single note on the floor. Scrawled in smeared red ink. "You are never alone." Crowley backed away, straight into the mirror. And her reflection, it was watching. Not mimicking. Watching. She turned, but the reflection didn't. It stayed still. Still smiling. Then it blinked. And she didn't. Her stomach twisted. Her reflection whispered, "They're already inside." The mirror shattered. A shadow lunged toward her. Crowley awoke on the floor. Her gun was missing. Her phone gone. The apartment was silent. But something had changed. The walls felt off. The air too thick. She sat up slowly. Her laptop was open. A video playing. A live feed. Of her. Standing in the middle of her bedroom. But she was still on the floor. She wasn't standing. She wasn't moving. But on screen, her other self turned to the camera and smiled. Crowley grabbed the laptop and slammed it shut. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. She stumbled to the door, fingers fumbling with the lock. She had to get out.
Now.
The moment she twisted the handle, a voice right behind her. Going somewhere? She spun, heart lurching. No one. The apartment was empty. Except for one thing. A mirror. Right where her front door used to be. And in it, her reflection wasn't alone anymore. Her knees buckled. The reflection showed her standing. But behind her, a shape.
Tall. Gaunt.
Featureless. And grinning. Her reflection took a step forward. She didn't. Another step. Then another. Her hands shook. Her reflection whispered, "Time to trade places." Then it lunged. Crowley lunged away from the mirror. But it was too late. The reflection reached out. Her own hand, but not hers.
Cold. Solid.
Impossible. Fingers closed around her wrist. Pulling. She fought, clawing at the wooden floor, kicking at the air, but the force was relentless, dragging her in. The glass rippled like water. She sank. Then, the mirror shattered, and she was gone. Darkness. Then, a breath. Hers?
No.
Someone else's. Crowley's eyes shot open. She was standing in a room that looked exactly like her apartment. But something was wrong. The furniture, off. The walls, too smooth. She turned to the mirror, only to see nothing. Her reflection was missing. Instead, the glass was a window. And on the other side, her, sitting on the real-world couch, drinking coffee, checking her phone, living her life. Crowley's blood turned ice. The thing that pulled her in, it had taken her place. She slammed her fists against the glass.
Hey.
Hey. Her double didn't react. Didn't blink. Then, a knock. Crowley spun around. The door to the strange mirror world stood slightly open. Beyond it, pure darkness. And from the shadows, a chuckle.
Low.
Mocking. Familiar.
Her own.
Then the voice. You finally get it, don't you? Crowley took a step back. The door creaked wider. The darkness inside shuddered. Then, something ran toward her.
Fast.
Too fast. She braced for impact. But it stopped. Just before it reached her. She could feel it. Breathing. Watching. Then a whisper. You shouldn't have laughed. The lights flickered. And the thing screamed. The entire world flashed white. Crowley hit the ground hard, gasping. She was back. In her apartment. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then, a voice from the mirror.
Low. Smirking.
Nice try. She turned, and her reflection was grinning. She bolted for the door, tore it open, and ran. The hallway was endless. Doors stretched infinitely in both directions. And behind her, her reflection was stepping out of the mirror. Still smiling. Still watching. You'll never leave, it whispered. Crowley's world tilted. Her mind spun. She wasn't sure who was real anymore. And somewhere, deep in the void, laughter. If you're hooked on this nightmare, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because in the world of true unseen crime, nothing is ever as it seems. Until next time, stay vigilant. Crowley's pulse hammered in her ears. She grabbed her phone, dialed Holland's number. It rang once.
Twice. Then,
Holland's dead. The voice wasn't his. Her stomach twisted. Who is this? A long, awful pause. Then, her own voice came through the speaker. You already know. The call cut. Her phone screen flickered. And her reflection smiled back. She threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered like glass. No circuits. No battery. Just a broken mirror. Her breath caught. Then, from the shards on the floor, a hand crawled out. Fingers first. Then a wrist. An arm pulling itself free. Her own arm. Another Crowley climbing out of the wreckage. And this one was laughing.
Crowley ran.
Down the hall. Through the front door. And into her apartment. Again. No exit. No escape. Her doppelganger stood in the doorway, smiling. Behind her, more were forming. One in the kitchen. One in the hallway mirror. One stepping out of the walls. They all looked at her. All of them laughing. In her voice. The last one always fights the hardest. Her hands trembled. The last one, she whispered. And then, she remembered. That shouldn't exist. A flash of memory. Holland. The case. The missing people. The first time she saw herself where she shouldn't be. The realization hit her like ice. She wasn't hunting the case. The case was hunting her. Her whole life a loop. A cycle. A replacement. And she was the last Crowley left. She turned to the mirror. Dozens of versions of her grinned back. And in the center, the real one, tied to a chair, screaming. The apartment began to collapse. Walls crumbling into mirrors. Reality splintering. The Crowleys closed in. She reached for her gun. Too late. Hands grabbed her, pulled her into the mirror. The last thing she saw before everything turned black was herself, smiling, standing outside the mirror, watching, whispering, "I never left." She was looking at someone else wearing her face. Inside the mirror, Crowley turned, scanning the empty, infinite space. The walls stretched forever, lined with endless reflections, each one showing a different version of her. Some younger, some older, some wrong. Their faces were off, mouths too wide, eyes too black. One of them stepped closer. "You're the last one," it whispered. Its head twitched violently. "You should never have looked." Then, the lights flickered, and all the reflections started moving toward her.
Crowley ran.
But there was nowhere to go. Every mirror, every reflection, was her. Some screaming, some laughing, some just watching. Her breath hitched as she saw
A door.
at the very end of the corridor. She sprinted for it, heart pounding. Just as she reached out, a hand shot out of the mirror and grabbed her wrist. She turned. It was her own hand, but the fingers were rotting. The other. Crowley grinned. "Let's switch places." Then it pulled her in. Crowley hit the floor hard. When she looked up, she was back in her apartment. Or was she? She stood.
Turned.
Everything felt the same, but the air was off. She grabbed her phone. No messages. No calls. She walked to the mirror. Her reflection was normal. She exhaled. It was over. Then, the reflection winked and turned away. Crowley's blood ran cold. Because she hadn't moved at all. Her phone buzzed. A message from Holland. "Where are you? You missed the briefing." Her fingers shook as she typed. "What briefing?" 3 dots appeared. Then, "The one where we found your body." Crowley's chest tightened. She looked at her hands. They weren't hers. They were someone else's. Then the reply came. "Who are you?" The walls shrank inward. Her reflection laughed. And this time she knew. She wasn't the one in control anymore. Underscore 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 underscore. Click 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 of footsteps in the dark. Something walked toward her. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it. Then, a voice. Her own. Whispering from the dark. "You never left." The lights flickered back on. Crowley stood in her precinct. At her desk. Her coffee was still warm. The case files untouched. Everything normal. Too normal. She exhaled, running a hand through her hair. Maybe it was just a breakdown. Maybe she was just tired. Her phone buzzed. A message from Holland. "We lost you for a second. You okay?" She smiled.
Yeah.
Just long night. She set her phone down and finally looked up at the glass window in front of her. Her reflection wasn't smiling back. Crowley didn't move. Her reflection just stared. Expressionless. Unblinking.
Wrong.
She reached for her phone. Her reflection didn't. Her chest tightened. Not real. Her fingers hovered over the screen. A message from Holland. "We need to talk. Come to the archives."
Now.
Crowley turned, and so did her reflection. A second too late. Like it was learning. She grabbed her gun and fired at the glass. The bullet hit nothing. The mirror was gone. So was the office. She was somewhere else. A hallway. Long, endless. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Somewhere ahead, a door creaked open, and she heard laughter. Her own.
Crowley ran.
The hallway twisted, shifted. Doors warped as she passed. She pushed one open and stepped into a morgue. Toe tags lined the cold bodies. She swallowed hard. Then she saw it. The last tag. Her name. Crowley pulled back the sheet and stared into her own dead face. Then, it smiled and whispered, "Found you." She stumbled backward. The body sat up. Its lips peeled back in a grin. Her grin. Crowley turned to run, but she was already in the hallway again. Her phone buzzed. A new message. From Holland. You're almost out. Just one more step. She took a breath. Then another. Then, the lights exploded. And the darkness swallowed her whole. Underscore 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 607 Eden or nowhere at all. Silence. Weightless. She floated in an abyss. No walls. No floor. No escape. Just her reflection suspended in front of her. It blinked. She didn't. Then it whispered, "It's your turn." Her own hands moved. Without her, she felt her body shift, like something was switching places. Her voice echoed, "No." But the darkness laughed. And she fell. Crowley's eyes snapped open. She was back. Her office. The precinct. The case files untouched. The coffee warm. Real. Right? Her phone buzzed. A message from Holland. "You okay?" Her fingers hovered. "Yeah." Then she stopped. And typed instead. "How do I know it's really you?" A pause. Then, "I was about to ask you the same thing." Her breath hitched. Her reflection in the computer screen was still smiling. Her screen flickered. A prompt appeared. Accept transfer. Y/N. Crowley's finger hovered over the keys. If she pressed no, would she wake up? Or just keep falling? A new message flashed. From herself. "Make it easy. Say yes." Her breath shook. Her reflection leaned closer and whispered, "You already did." She looked down. Her finger was already pressing Y. Then, the world shattered. Crowley sat at her desk. Normal. The station bustled around her. A case file in front of her. Project Echo, final phase approved. She swallowed hard. Her phone buzzed. A message from Holland. Long night. She stared at the screen. Her fingers trembled as she typed. "Yeah. Just tired." She hit send. Then, her screen glitched. A message appeared. From herself. "See you soon." She turned to the glass window. And her reflection winked. If this sent chills down your spine, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because in the world of true unseen crime, you can never be sure who's looking back at you.